All right, so here is the worksheet on finding volume. So this is what we use for practice to help us solidify what we learned in class with volume. And so in class we learned volume by using sugar cubes. And so I wanted to start us off with a worksheet that kind of looked like what we built in class with the sugar cubes. And so I have individual unit cubes that make up a 3D object, which is a rectangular prism, and we are finding the volume of this rectangular prism. So I'm going to skip the example in number 1 because I did that in most of the classes, but I'll do number 2 and then number 6, and then hopefully that'll be enough to help us, and then I'll pick up a couple from the other worksheet as well. And so for number 2, if I were to build this in 3D, so we've got to use our imagination for a moment, and if I were to build this figure in number 2 for build it using the sugar cubes and set it down on my piece of paper, and I were to trace around the bottom of it, on all sides. And so what figure I would get would of course be a rectangle. So I'd have a rectangle that I traced around my base of my 3D object of my rectangular prism. And so of course across the front here what I have is 3 units. And so that's going to give me a base of my rectangle of 3, and then going from front to back I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. And so this way from front here to back here I have 5 units as well. So you could label them centimeters if you want. I'm going to label mine units. And so I have 5 units and 3 units. And so to find the area of that base shape, so big B is the area of the base. I have base times height. And so area of the base is 3 units times 5 units. And so now I have 3 times 5, which is 15. Units times units gives me units squared, and I have now found the area of my base. But what I'm needing to find is actually the volume. So I'm going to use what I know to find the volume. And so as we know, the volume formula for my rectangular prism is simply volume equals big B, which is area of the base, times the height or the tallness. And so I'm going to go ahead and change mine just a little bit, and I'm going to write a capital H just so I know that that means something different. And so what that's referring to is this height here, how tall, how many layers my rectangular prism is. And so now I'm going to substitute what I know. So volume equals area of my base, which was 15 units squared, times the tallness of my rectangular prism, or how many layers tall it is. And so it's 1, 2, 3, 4 layers tall. And so that's going to give me volume equals 15 times 4, which is 60. Units squared times units is going to give me units cubed. And the way that we can know that is we'll see the pattern. So if we had 4 times 4 is the same thing as 4 squared. 6 times 6 is the same thing as 6 squared. And then also, I think at one point in our exponents unit, we saw that 7 times 7 times 7 we could abbreviate as, not 6, 7 to the 3rd power, or 7 cubed. And so in the same way, units times units gives me units squared. And then in volume, I have units times units times units, which is units cubed. And that's the same thing as units squared times another units is also units squared. So it's the same kind of thing. It follows that same pattern. So just know that always my area is square units, or to the 2nd power. Volume is always cubic units to the 3rd power. And another way that we could remember that is squares are 2-dimensional, so squares would have a 2, and cubes are 3-dimensional, so if it's cubed, it's going to be to the 3rd power. Alright, let's move over to question number 6. And so on number 6, same thing. If I were to set that down on my paper and trace it, I'm going to get a rectangle. Across the front here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 units. And then from front to back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. And so the area of the base, or big B, is base times height, because my shape is a rectangle, and area of a rectangle is base times height. And so my base is 4 units, my height is 5 units, and so 4 times 5 is 20, units times units is units squared, and so now I have found the value of big B, or the area of the base. I'm ready to move forward and find volume. Well, volume is the same for all of my rectangular prisms. It's that area of the base times how tall, or how many layers, or the distance between my bases in my rectangular prism. So volume is, big B, as we said, was 20. And then my height of my 3D shape, or my tallness, or how many layers it is, well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 layers tall. And so my volume is 20 times 4, which will give me 80. Units squared times units will give me units cubed. And so what I'm hoping that you'll eventually recognize, the pattern that I'm hoping that you'll see, is that for each of these, we're simply multiplying this quantity here times this quantity here first, and then we're multiplying that by this quantity here. So in this case, this is a 3 by 2, which will give me 6 times 3 tall. And so 6 times 3 is 18. So my volume is actually going to be 18 units cubed. And then we can go ahead and do another one, but I'll do it on the next page. So let's do that. All right, so now we're on the back. We do not have all of the different individual cubes. We just have the entire rectangular prism, but the same thing is going to hold true. So I'm going to multiply my quantities together, because if I were to draw that out as a rectangle, I would have a 5 centimeter, and this one does tell us it's centimeters, 5 centimeter by 8 centimeter. So 8 times 5 will give me 40, so I'm going to have a big B value of 40 centimeters squared. Multiply that by the tallness, how many layers it is, and even though they're not individually drawn out, I see that I have 7 layers tall. So volume will then be big B, which is 40 centimeters squared, times 7 centimeters tall, and that will give me a volume of 280, because 7 times 4 is 28, so 7 times 40 is 280 centimeters cubed. And we can do one more, just for the fun of it, because we're having so much fun here. And so I have a 6 by 6 base, so that's 36 times 5, and then that's going to give me my volume. So volume equals 36 centimeters squared times 5 centimeters. And then we're done. See you guys in class.